Right now, it is time for the Berkshire Edge on air. BerkshireEdge.com. The BerkshireEdge.com is where you find them on the internet. But on a Wednesday morning, you find them right here at Robin Hood Radio. And we say good morning to both David and Marcy. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Well, we're not too bad here. We actually see the sun, that globe in the sky is kind of
out. Too excited. It's not doing.
But other than that, we're okay. We're getting along. As I always like to say, on the right side of the dirt. It's exactly.
Exactly.
For now, anyways. I want to start off with your first story about Berkshire District Attorney Andrea Harrington has established a county task force combating domestic violence and sexual assault.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is something she mentioned in her, promised in her campaign, and she's really uncovered a whole area that the previous district attorney, in fact, district attorneys never paid much attention to, good for Andrea. This is really terrific. But apparently, she's uncovered and that domestic violence and sexual assault occurs, as she says, a lot. And
well, she had it as part of her campaign, and I hate to bring this up, but look at that terrible suicide and fire that took place.
Well, yeah.
That's an extreme example of it, but it's as good an example as you can get. That I think a lot of people will look at that. Oh, it's some husband went crazy and killed his family. It's obviously more than that.
Yes. And I'm glad that she's gathered, officials from the city hall and government and town governments, but is also from the Breen Center and the Elizabeth Freeman Center and the Railroad Street Youth Project, and she'll make this a county-wide campaign to combat this and make it a primary issue and focus of her office. And I think that is really something. She's really doing some real good here.
Well, and like you said, I'm surprised that hasn't been in like the top 2 or 3 list for other district attorneys that have been around, because it's a problem that Women's Support Services down here has over the past 20 years really, really brought out to life. Not only it's Women's Support Services, but there's men now in the same situation. When it's sexual abuse, when it's abuse, it's abuse, and it's good to see the district attorney's office getting so weighed in and involved.
It is, and good for her. This is something that needed to be done a long time ago. And, I hate to say this, but it took a woman to realize that this was an important issue.
You hate to say it, but it's true. I mean, it's apparently true.
Well, it is, yeah.
The Good Old Boy Network in Pittsfield, and among the Democrats in Berkshire County, I might add, has finally gotten a little bit of a jolt here.
Being
Harrington,
being a misogynist or someone who doesn't understand women is not a party problem. It is a problem, a cultural problem that goes along certain lines.
Oh, it's amazing, because I remember years ago I was visiting a friend of mine who lived in Palo Alto, California, which is, where there's probably more PhDs and advanced degrees per capita than anywhere else in the country. And,
Cambridge. How about Cambridge?
Oh, Cambridge, right. But anyway, Palo Alto is pretty high up there, and she was a foundation officer, and she went to a meeting about sexual abuse or spousal abuse in Palo Alto, and she came back shocked that of the high level of domestic abuse in Palo Alto, which was, where people were well paid and well educated. So it's not
It's not socioeconomic.
It breaks.
Not socioeconomic.
But
it breaks across all
historically, when you think about it, there's no reason to assume that it would be.
Yeah. But
it's
a human problem.
It's
right.
a human problem.
Yep.
And that's what
but
makes.
I think this was maybe 15 years ago, and
no, but I think that one of the erroneous assumptions that's made is that it couldn't be us, and I think that doesn't help. That's just my interpolation.
Us are.
That's a good
them.
That is,
and we don't let them across the border either. And in fact, we build big walls to keep them out.
That's why this is.
It isn't us.
Yeah, that is why what she's doing is the way to do it. You want to build something that's going to be successful. You have to build it from the ground up, and you get strength from the ground up. I think it's that the task force is an extremely smart idea. And
we have also had in Berkshire County this Elizabeth Freeman Center, which is very active, which is named after Mumbet, the slave, the slave who sued for her freedom and was the first, I guess, emancipated slave in Massachusetts. So it was a woman. So it's an apt name that this is, this protects women. But that has been very prominent and very active. So we have on a social services level had paid attention here in Berkshire County.
But now with the task force,
but not in the legal estate.
With a task force like this, it will become stronger, and those organizations will all of a sudden have a powerful friend.
It's hard not to be sympathetic to these poor women, and who end up often being the syndrome is that they. The police come to take away their man, and all of a sudden they realize that they can't live without him, so they protect him, even though the man has been abusing them. So women really do need help.
All right, we'll move on to the second story that we've highlighted, and that is Great Barrington making a push to promote public transportation with an upgraded transit authority bus route.
Yes, that is the town select board has established a little committee to look at the improving public transportation and look at what the public transportation needs are. And they're starting off with the Berkshire Regional Transit Authority, which runs the little bus service, and they're looking to find out exactly where people need these bus routes to be established and to upgrade the service to make it more convenient for people to use public transportation rather than drive their cars everywhere. And so this is kind of innovative as well. For a town to really tackle this problem and regard it as a town municipal issue. So this is good for Great Barrington. These are two really good stories we have here. I mean, of public initiatives they're really good, I think.
That's it. Initiatives that have been not initiated by people, but actually the government that's there meant to serve the people. That's what's great about it.
The couple of interesting things about this is, first of all, the state government, Charlie Baker has proposed cuts in the Regional Transportation Authority funding that would have left the Berkshire Regional Transportation Authority, or BRTA, Transit Authority, BRTA, with a big operating deficit. And the other thing is this committee is chaired by a 15-year-old Simon's Rock student who is a self-described transportation advocate, and she is so. This is very interesting. I mean, it's wonderful that this kid has gotten involved, and she's been working with has been working with a member of our select board to improve transportation locally. And I guess it's really, it seems perfectly right that a 15-year-old who can't yet drive would be most aware of how difficult it is to get around without a car.
Absolutely.
Right.
Now, I want to move on to the next story because we talk about marijuana and South County a lot, but the state has approved the first outdoor growing site, and where is it? Of course,
Great Barrington. Well, where else would it be?
It's in Sheffield.
It's in Sheffield. Yeah, but
No,
I mean,
it's not. It's in Sheffield, right?
Yeah. But it's amazing.
Well,
Yeah.
you know what's interesting about this is it's Ted Dobson is a partner in this enterprise that has been approved for growing marijuana, and it wasn't so long ago, as I mentioned, that he was arrested by the state police he runs Equinox Farm, and he grows arugula.
Lots of arugula. Sold in Guidos.
And sold in Guidos. I mean, he's just famous for his arugula and other products that he grows on his farm, for his organic produce. And years ago, they found the state was always searching for, the state police were always searching for people growing pot illegally. And they would have a helicopter fly over people's fields and yards, and with some kind of thermal imaging device that could find marijuana. And he was busted for growing pot in amongst his arugula.
Was he convicted, or was just...
No, he was fined.
He was fined.
Yeah, and but he was, as a result of his guilty plea, he was a select person in Sheffield at the time, and he had to resign. So now he has been given this license by the state in order to grow pot, for which he was arrested not so long, a few years ago. I think this is so ironic.
It is an incredible story, and it reminds me of my grandmother's old line: some people step in you-know-what and slide, and other people step in it and come up smelling roses. Well, he hasn't come up smelling roses, but he's come up smelling cannabis.
Other people step in it and sell it.
That's right. Well, I guess he's obviously good at growing things, so I guess he'd be a person to grow marijuana.
He's one of those early advocates for organic farming. One of the Berkshire grown members who has been, so this is giving new meaning to the idea of Berkshire grown.
It certainly does, and maybe one day he'll figure out a way to crossbreed arugula and marijuana, and you'll come up with Awana arugula. All right. Let's go on to.
Well, that's right. I can hardly wait to see little packets of pot
arugula.
Guidos. Right.
That's right. All right, now
and we'll have in our salad.
Right.
That's right. Let's go from arugula and pot to something that is addicting, and that is maple syrup.
Oh yes, I mean that's a nice transition, isn't it? Another wonderful Berkshire product or local product.
Well, this is we had a nice story about the Gould Farm out in Monterey, which is growing, which is tapping its trees, and
maple trees,
and producing lots of maple syrup for everybody. And it's a really interesting story about how this particular farm has organized its crew to produce many hundreds of gallons of maple syrup. Of course, I used to do that myself, actually.
Well, I lived on a farm, a chicken farm, and coming out of winter, that was the tubes were all put up on the trees, and back then we had big silver buckets, and you had to collect the sap from the buckets and bring it in, and then my grandmother would spend a full weekend of making maple syrup, and then after that she'd make maple syrup candies and stuff like that.
Oh, right. Well, it
Maple
takes
sugar.
40 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of...
Oh,
Yeah.
I remember hauling those things in.
Yeah, but you have to know that. What I'm saying is, you need to know that.
I mean, I just remember hauling those things in, and I was also one that I would drink the sap because the sap itself is really, really, really good.
Is it good?
Oh, it's sweet, but it's very good.
So is it,
I'll tell you another thing you can do. If it snows, you can pack snow and dip it in the maple syrup evaporator.
Yep.
And you can have a maple syrup snowball, and
that is really good.
It's just a really good, delicious.
Maple syrup is good. We've all decided it's one of the best products to come out of New England, along with really good cheese.
well, but don't you wonder how this was first discovered? I mean,
it was the Native Americans discovered it, and how they discovered it because of the their taste buds must have been so sensitive because the amount of sweetness in the sap was so diluted that and to figure out how to just boil it down, that's brilliant.
Well, it's brilliant and it's messy.
Well, it takes a lot. Listen,
and you have to do it outside, otherwise your ceiling gets.
My grandmother did it. We had a huge kitchen.
I've had that happen. I've tried to do that, boil the sap in pots in my kitchen, and the ceiling becomes just coated with grime, sweet grime.
Well, my grandmother used to do it every year in our big kitchen, and then she'd clean it all up. But I'll tell you, it was a lot of work. And my father used to say to her all the time, Mildred, why don't we just go to the store and buy the damn syrup?
I know. Well, we're waiting. David has contracted with a wonderful group here called Greenagers, who are building new raised beds so that we can grow vegetables. And I keep thinking I could just go to the supermarket and buy vegetables. But somehow it's much nicer when you make it yourself.
Now, you have a story that comes off this, and it's funny because I was watching, I have to admit this, Weather Channel the other day talking about the storm coming into the Midwest, but they brought up a report exactly what you have here, which we can take at. The maple sugaring season is going to change in our region simply because of the change of climate. And you've got a story on this.
Well, that's true because what you need is days about just above freezing, 35 to 40 degrees, and nights below freezing to come out in the trees. Then the syrup itself, then it's bitter, and so it's no longer usable. So you have just this little window of time in order to tap those trees.
But, growers have been talking about this for years, that it keeps getting, the season keeps changing for even when you can do this. We're probably later than are we later or are we earlier than it used to be?
It would probably be earlier, but, I wonder too, what effect this climate change has on the trees themselves. Since that they rely on, that period of time when the sap is kind of cleaning out, the veins in which their nutrients are flowing, and I wonder if the warmer climate is going to damage them in some way.
They didn't get into that. They just said that the season was going to be earlier and shorter, and also changeable because it could, it's not as predictable as it has been. No. Well, I want to wrap up though, taking a look at your last story, and that's a bunch of different opportunities for entertainment and information. Yes.
Well, I have to disclose that one of these items is about a concert at the Mahawi this Saturday night with the American Brass Quintet being presented by Close Encounters with Music, of which I am board chair. So I am particularly anxious to get the word out. But this is going to be a fabulous concert. I mean, these are, 5 brass musicians who are extremely well known and put on a great performance. So I urge people to come to the Mahiwi at 6 o'clock to the Close Encounters with Music concert.
Well, meanwhile,
right.
over at Simon's Rock, there is the 6th annual Think Food Conference that examines the state of agriculture and nutrition. And that is also a really interesting conference that speakers from around the country are coming for. So that's another opportunity for people to take a look at what is the future may hold.
It is amazing here in this little area. I mean, I don't mean just Great Barrington, but how many interesting things there are to do here. Out here in the country, where people think we're in the boondocks, but there's so many interesting things
and serious,
yeah,
serious concepts being talked about here.
Right. Now we also, in that same article, that's our bits and bytes section where we kind of review interesting things to do. We also talk about a Bring It to the Light Music Festival that's taking place in Norfolk on April 11th at Infinity Hall.
Right.
So this is the first of a series of music and education speakers with the goal of bringing public awareness to the opioid crisis. So that should be interesting too.
All right.
April 11th.
Well, we
tomorrow.
We have all this and much more. The BerkshireEdge.com, the BerkshireEdge.com, and we will speak to you guys next week.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
That is the Berkshire Edge on air here on Robin Hood Radio. Once again, you can find them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The BerkshireEdge.com.